I picked up that title, Fail With Me, is because I saw that everywhere we say success in materialistic terms, we don't often talk about failures. So, what our failure? What is it that it is trying to tell us?
And in this culture of social media, they're all afraid to fail. I was either invisible or people were being mean to me, and I couldn't figure out why. I'd walk into a room, people would pause and they'd look at me, not in a negative way, with a respect. Or I'd say things and people would hear me. And then it was almost like I could move people with my voice. All of the heads of states have taken spoken voice work. Like that's Trump, Obama, Clinton's, Boris Johnson, other political figures. They've all done spoken voice work because it's this power of being able to be heard and move people's minds and bodies and their hearts to do something.
Hello everyone, I am Obro and this is Stories and Stanza. Let's dive into what makes us human through intimate conversations about creativity, failure and resilience. Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza. And today I have a very special guest with me, Sam Malone. Hi, Sam. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Had a very busy day, but finally we found a time slot to record this episode. It was lovely to catch up with you. And you are a voice coach, and a podcast is all about voice. And I feel that there will be a lot of interesting things to talk about. But before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a spoken voice coach. Hi, everyone. I should probably start with my name. That's so funny. I'm Sam Malone, and I'm a spoken voice coach. I'll explain what that is in a moment, but I am humbled enough to work at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama as the main voice tutor for musical theatre. And I also work at a place called RADA, which would be similar to the Juilliard of the UK, as you would have Juilliard in the US. And my students have gone on to be leads in West End musicals such as Mamma Mia, Mean Girls, Hadestown, Standing on the Sky's Edge, Harry Potter, Rise of Saturn, basically all of them. So I've been very privileged to work with those lovely young people, teaching them to speak, not sing. That's the singing teacher's work. I work on their speaking. And I also have been lucky enough to work with companies such as Wagamama, which would be more like a mid-tier food chain that's East Asian inspired. They are open primarily in the UK, also throughout Europe. And they have restaurants in the US, and they've just opened up in Mumbai. It's been an amazing launch. The people I've coached on their team on how to speak as well, one of them was going viral in Mumbai, which is crazy. He's their culture lead, and they have amazing culture stats. Like, people are very engaged at their work there. And in terms of other corporate work, I've worked a little bit with major law firms, doing short workshops with places like Skadden or Accenture. So Skadden would be one of the major law firms in the US. They also work in London or other law firms like that, as well as Accenture, like I just mentioned, which would be more like a Google techie. People might have heard about it, but if you're not tech, so working with those individuals on how they speak with their clients. So they might be the most technical person in the world, but how do we translate that to someone like me who barely knows how to turn on their laptop? So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And is there anything you wanted to mention as well, Obro? Is there anything else you wanted to mention about any of that?
Yeah, I have a lot to mention on that. So first of all, when it comes to speaking, right? I mean, as I was saying that this episode would be close to 100. I think I am about 95 plus here in that journey. And when I started off in this podcast, I was not confident as to how do I sound. And I used to record a little bit of my own writing from time to time, which is what took me to this world of podcasting. But when I started off, I was not confident. And it took me a long time to get over those fears and hesitations to be the podcast host I am today. So that is one part of it. And the second part that you mentioned, like how you've worked with corporate about talking and speaking in events, talking to customers, I can totally understand how challenging that can be. Because when we are talking about this at a corporate scale, it's like you have to bring in a blend of a lot of things. You have to understand the problem, and then you have to talk about the solution, and you have to handle all the questions and everything. So I believe that everything has to be done in a slightly different tone. I've been working in tech for 2+ decades. So I totally relate to the people you might have coached. So it will be a lot of ground to cover today. In Stories and Stanza, we run a theme called Fail With Me. I picked up that title, Fail With Me, is because I saw that everywhere we say success in materialistic terms, we don't often talk about failures. So, what is our failure? What is it that it is trying to tell us? So, that was my motivation behind it. And I felt that if I say fail with me, probably it will normalize failure. Probably it will give us insights to what we are labeling as failure. And then that kind of spiraled into a lot of discussions in this podcast. So, the first thing I'd like to hear from you is how does that idea sit with you? And do you have a story to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think the idea of failure is so powerful, especially in today's world. I think that because I work with a lot of young adults, so I typically see them at a university level when they come to the conservatoire. A conservatoire is a place where it's more arts or theater training. So it's more physical and practical, not just heady for listeners who might not know what a conservatoire is, because some words that some people don't use. I think that what I'm finding with younger generations in particular is they're too afraid of being quote unquote cringe. They don't want to look bad, but they don't realize that there's so much effort that goes into something. You only see the finished product. So if you think about the Olympic athlete, you don't see the blood, sweat, and tears. You don't see them getting upset. You don't see them falling over and over. You just see the final result. And in this culture of social media, they're all afraid to fail. And so I think it's really important that you brought this up. I think it's really good in terms of like a podcast. I think it humanizes us. So like kudos to you. It seems really cool. In terms of spoken voice, so I'll tell a little bit, I guess, about my story, and then I'll explain what spoken voice is, because I don't think everyone knows what it actually is. They're probably thinking it's public speaking. So we'll start with that. So I guess my fail to grow, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Lovely. So when I was doing my undergrad back in Canada, I was in international business. But at the time, I really remember people just, whether it was on the street, like this was back, and I'm from like rural conservative kind of city at the time, people would like shout slurs out their windows at me. So like not nice things. Or it might be like I'd go to a university party and no one would talk to me. No one would even notice me, or they'd say me and I'd just kind of be like invisible. I was either invisible or people were being mean to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And so when I did my undergrad in business, you can do a double major in Canada. It doesn't have to be one major. Some countries prefer you do one major, but you can do 2 majors of study. So I almost did a double major in acting. And my spoken voice teacher there became my mentor. And I asked her to teach me how to shift my voice and movement when I felt unsafe or unseen, etc. And through this work, all of a sudden, everything started to change. I'd walk into a room, people would pause and they'd look at me, not in a negative way, with a respect. Or I'd say things and people would hear me. And then it was almost like I could move people with my voice and they would feel very inspired to do something. I had more influence. So spoken voice work is this hidden art form. So if you think of acting, we call that the art form, acting. But underneath acting, almost like a safety net, is the craft. And the craft is like the technical skills. So if you're becoming a professional athlete in basketball, you need to practice the craft of dribbling. So like you keep bouncing the ball, or footwork in football or soccer, depending on what you call it. So that is the craft to apply to the art form. And the craft work in acting is typically broken down into two fields. Not always, there's others as well. Movement. So, how do you move? And I don't just mean body language. So, how do you look comfortable on stage? How do you embody a character so it looks natural? It doesn't feel uncomfortable or weird. And then spoken voice. And spoken voice work, what I mean by it being hidden is this skill set that's not just public speaking. A public speaking coach will say, oh, you need to speak louder, you need to say it like this. But a lot of people's voices over time get really tight. And that's from trauma, that's from injury, that's from tension in their connective tissue in their body. And in my book, which I will mention later on, I call it the neuro voice field. So I've taken it a little bit out of the realm of spoken voice, but the neuro voice field. So how do we calm your nervous system instead of it being in a constant state of stress? How do we calm the body in terms of connective tissue, make sure it gets open and you come into your natural power and presence? And that in turn opens the voice. And that's when you get the magical sweet spot where you can say something and people will be really taken by what you say. All of the heads of states have taken spoken voice work. Like that's Trump, Obama, Clinton's, Boris Johnson, other political figures. They've all done spoken voice work because it's this power of being able to be heard and move people's minds and bodies and their hearts to do something. And so I'm trying to take it out of just theater or the social elite and move it into self-help, and then also integrate things like I said, the nervous system and connective tissue, if that makes any sense. It's a lot of information.
It absolutely does. Because we talked a bit about corporate speaking, and I know people who can be really special, like they can be subject matter experts. But when it comes to speaking, it's not the fear of speaking, but they get tensed. And in that process, they jumble the way they talk. So I can totally relate to that, what you're saying.
And I think you just hit it on its head. So that tension in the body is a nervous system response. So I know there's a lot of therapists and I love them, and they tend to work on the mindset. I do the opposite. I work from the body. So I was once working with someone who was going to be speaking in front of a bunch of people, and they were talking about a very personal story. And every time they talk about it, they'd start break down crying. And then through the voice work and the breathing techniques, and I don't mean like Wim Hof, the hyperventilating. I mean, there's other breathing techniques. I don't mean necessarily singing breathing techniques. Her body learned to calm down the nervous system. It was no longer in fight, flight, freeze. There's two other states, which we can get into later, flop and fawn. And her body began to process. And then ever since that point, anytime she talked about it, she's like, this is crazy. I can speak about it now without crying, because her body was processing the emotions, and then it could move the audience. And then people were very moved by that person's speech because they could be open. They weren't overly emotional, because some people shut down if you're overly emotional, but they could also connect as well. And it's like you said, in tech, a lot of the time you might be able to say Python or all these different kinds of like coding JavaScript, right? And I'm like, I don't understand that. I know those words, but I don't understand it. But how do you get someone like me, your client, to understand and be motivated to do it? So, yes, we have a little bit about what you're saying is important and how you say it. So, there's an art form to persuade people. People use it in politics all the time. This is why they have speechwriters. But if your body and your voice are not open, this is what I mean by, in my book, I call neuro voice field coherence. I call it coherence. So if my body isn't open, my nervous system isn't calm, and my voice isn't open, if one of those parts are out, we'll think you're lying. So if you go see a West End show and they're like, I love you, I go, you're lying. We can tell you're lying. And my job is to get the actor to speak to the back of a theater without yelling, without a microphone, and people to be emotionally moved. So when I go into a space, I can say things and I'll be in a room full of lawyers. I was working not necessarily SCAD in a different law firm. And I said to them, if you sit to my left and right, who has the power in the room? And they said, you, Sam. These are people who get paid like thousands of pounds an hour. One of the top law firms in the UK. It wasn't SCAD, it was another one. And it was like, I had the power as a spoken voice coach. The way I use my voice, the way I'm moved. And it makes me think, how are people dealing with that fear and stress response that fail to grow? This is why I became so passionate about voice, because I realized how much I was carrying in my body. I was making myself small. In my book, I speak about taking up physical and vocal space. I was not taking up physical and vocal space. I don't mean yelling. I don't mean acting like a man, because a lot of ladies say, I don't want to act like a man. It's not about that. It's about being open in your body, your nervous system, and voice. And that's when power comes. And my students even go as far to say, and clients, they go, oh my God, it's not that people are really attractive. It's the way they carry themselves. And I go, yeah, but it's not just about carrying yourself. Is your body open? I had one student who had a bad spinal curve called scoliosis, and she grew, like, I kid you not, 3 to 4 inches through some of the work we were doing because her body decompressed. Connective tissue opened, the spine opened, her voice became more. And this is why they have so much presence when they enter a room, these highly trained actors. And at places like Central, we only take about 1% of applicants, less than 1%. It's very competitive to get in. We only take about 18, 20 students a year across like thousands and thousands of people who apply. So these people do have some talent, but it's how do we make them have that je ne sais quoi, that energy that pulls them into you, that makes them captivating.
That is beautiful. In this podcast, one of my favorite topics to discuss is emotional intelligence. And I think what you are saying, I can, even though I don't know the nitty gritties of it, but I can totally relate to what you are explaining, because we did a lot of episodes on mind-body connection. If you can open your mind to possibilities, you can virtually do anything. So in a way, it inspires, or it kind of speaks to the core theme of this podcast. And this is something that makes me curious, is we are talking about re-narrating that body response. We are trying to talk about how we process the stress signals from our body and then opening our nervous system to the possibilities of how we sound. I have noticed something on the speaking context is where I was doing everything, but I felt, no, I don't sound right. You mentioned the cringe bit, yes? So I had that feeling. Then gradually, it took me on a path that my voice is a form of self-awareness or self-acceptance. When that came and I felt there's nothing wrong with my voice, it's just a phase of acceptance for me. And I want to hear your thoughts around when someone is not comfortable with their voice. How do you work with them?
Yeah, so I think you've hit on a really human subject. And like when I discuss this in my writing, I say that we attach so much of our identity to our voice. And if you think about someone, when you listen to them, when I hear you, I can hear rightly or wrongly, whether it's bias or stereotype. I can hear age, gender, socioeconomic status, so how much money or education or um, accent in terms of previous language. Now, accents are funny because no accent belongs to one group of people. In Canada, we have people from all different races that speak with a Canadian accent. So we have to be really careful of the intersection of ideas there, the intersectionality, because people think, oh, if he speaks with a Canadian accent, he must be white and I'm mixed race Korean. But what's really interesting is you have all these ideas of how men should sound, how women should sound, how smart people should sound, how rich people should sound. And on top of that, we can't hear ourselves. The way the sound comes out, it comes out this way. It doesn't come out through the side of our head. We have sound go through our teeth and bones into our ears, so we sound richer to ourselves, but out here it might not. And things like your microphone might cut sound, Zoom or other recording software, or people's headphones might not get all the richness of the sound. So it can be very jarring to hear yourself. And I don't think there's any such thing as an ugly voice. I think there's just different ways of using your voice. I think some people use more bright tones or dark tones in their voice. And when you have more balance in the voice, it becomes easier to hear and more captivating. But there's no such thing as like an ugly or wrong voice. And I agree with you. There's so many people who feel like their voice isn't good enough. Maybe their boss told them that. Maybe their parents told them that. Maybe they're just have this silly narrative in their head where they're thinking, I'm not worth listening to. And that's going to, that on top of what I'm talking about, the neuro voice field, impacts your ability to take up vocal space. It's usually the quiet person in a room who actually understands things the best, but never speaks up. And they've never been taught to. They've never been taught to use their voice. How do you say no and mean it? So when I use my voice and when I practiced a lot, people say, "Oh my gosh, Sam, your voice went into my body. That was so weird. I could feel it. It like shook my body because I can direct my voice." And so when I say something like no, people go, "Wow, that was like really intimidating," but not in like a you're mean and scary way, but just what you're saying is matching your body and your intention and your nervous system. And I'm really hearing that. Or in a room, everyone hears me clearly. So, but that's the thing, everyone has that available to them. This is what I mean by like a hidden art form. Your voice can do these amazing things. And with social media and tech, we've started to lose that a lot. No offense, tech folk. I know you're trying to make our lives easier. And the thing about if you want to be a leader, you have to learn to speak. Because your skill level might be up here, but we might not be able to hear it in your speaking. Ask Wing or Vin from Australia. He's a famous, I call him more a public speaking coach. He would call me more a voice coach. He says that, and I agree. Like, we don't always hear it, and your leadership skills don't necessarily translate until you speak. And it's not just speaking. How do you get the audience to do something? How are you going to explain it in a way that makes them go, wow? But if you're too busy thinking about your voice, because you don't accept your voice, then your mind's going two directions at once and it's not going to work.
Interestingly, this kind of connects back to the fail with me narrative is that, of course, I do not wish anyone to fail. I am saying that find out what our failures are telling us. In a lot of cases, failure needs unlearning. The taboo bit comes from conditioning in social, family circumstances, and a number of things. But the moment we are able to unlearn it or create a different narrative, that is when things started changing. So it goes full circle as to how we started the fail with me components. And then we explained the concepts of speaking.
But then I think you're right, because that idea of failing. So one of the things that one of my mentors, a movement coach, I explained what a movement coach was, my old professor. I saw her recently in London when she was visiting. She said, Sam, we must become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Her name is Val Campbell, and it changed my life. How do you sit in that meeting and speak up, even if it's uncomfortable? How do we become comfortable with the uncomfortable? Because our nervous system carrying all that past garbage is going to react and go, oh no, you're unsafe. So if you think of polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, who talks about like nervous system, I think you had a guest speaking about
Yes.
this. And it's that idea of like fight, flight, and fawn would be more anxiety, and flop and freeze would be more depression. But when we calm in a very practical breathing way or body work, so I was working with some entrepreneurs and I made them lay on the floor and breathe with me. It's very unusual, but they trusted me. We had been working a lot. They're pitching for millions of pounds of investment. And they even let me record them. So I'm going to post that on LinkedIn soon. It looks like they're having like seizures, but they're not because it's fast forward. But they said, oh my God, Sam, this work is phenomenal. We've never done it. My body feels so open, so relaxed, so calm. And I've never experienced that. And so, how do we find that in those uncomfortable situations so we have access to the higher thoughts so that we're okay to fail? Because that's when we truly grow. That's when people hear us. That's when we learn to let our voice express. Because if you think about it, like we can write and text, but you lose a lot of the meaning. A lot of the meanings, even on podcast, we're using the voice to convey so much energy and emotion, and it's quite quick. And it's how we express ourselves as humans is largely done through the voice. Obviously, you have outliers like sign language, which also is another way of expressing. And then, like I said, typing. But most of us, it's through our voice. Otherwise, we have no idea what's going on with you, with your
Absolutely.
friends. Yeah.
You mentioned something that works very well for me. I am a writer. So a lot of times when I write poetry, it comes to me as a voice, even if I have, like before I have written it. So it comes with a certain voice. And when I have written it, I feel like it has to be read in this way. So the expression, the voice comes first. Even in writing, so there is a thought at the back of my mind. So it kind of resonates that this is how it is going to sound.
Yeah. And so I know different people think in different ways. I believe I haven't done research on this, but I think there's 5 different ways of thinking. And some people do hear a voice, their own voice or other people's voices in their head. Interestingly, on the topic of AI, I know it's really hot right now. I made a post recently saying that if you get an AI to speak for you, we will not believe you are a leader. So you might do it in your writing, but even then we start to go, did you write this or did AI write this? And it's that human, almost like capital or quotient. And when I'm working with entrepreneurs or high level executives, recently I was working with an exec who was about to speak in front of a bunch of people, really talented, gets paid a lot of money. And clearly this person had used ChatGPT or some other AI to write the text. And it was like technically good, but it wasn't right for the audience, the emotion, for his style of speaking. It didn't work. And he went, oh my gosh, this is written really well for like reading, but you're right, Sam, it's not good for speaking. And then we worked on technical things like you didn't suspend the energy enough there. You didn't make us all go, wow. I really want to know more. And so he lost that human essence. And I had to go through that script with him. And we had to rewrite things in his voice, in his words. And AI is amazing for getting things done. I use it as well, but then I have to make it in my voice. Like, so what I typically do is I'll tell it what I want it. Like, I'll be like, these are my key points. Okay, let's write this out. Then I go, this doesn't sound like me. This doesn't sound like me. I need to rewrite this to be more like me. And that's where you find a sweet spot, because then you're working with the AI, which might speed things up, but as well, it needs to be in your tone, in your voice, as well as like things like critical thinking are really important for that.
Yes, I mean, I am a big user of AI platforms, and AI has made my podcasting so easy. So now it kind of, all this that we are doing, I'll go into an AI platform and that will edit it for me. So before that, when I had to do it manually, to take me hours. Now this has become like a matter of minutes for me. That editing process has been so simple. But I totally agree with you that if it is not your own voice, then it may have some utility, but it would not be the leadership or that statement there.
Well, and I think back to your fail with me, when people pass away, one thing that they really try to keep is their loved one's voice messages. It's their voice that really makes people think of you. That's what makes it's your personality too. It shows who you are. And I think moving it again beyond public speaking, like if you're speaking in a room and you are not audible, meaning you are not easy to hear, you could be the smartest person in the room, you could be the best public speaker. But if I have what I call auditory friction, meaning I have to work hard to hear you, and that it's not about speaking louder, it's about learning to open your voice so you're naturally more resonant. So I can be quite resonant and have a low volume, and most people in the room can hear me clearly because I'm very resonant. That's where you take up vocal space. And this is where, until you experience it in person, it's hard to experience online. You go, wow, this person has so much influence. It makes them irresistible. It makes them have that power. And I think learning to find your voice, both in what you're saying, how you're saying it, but more importantly, in your body, nervous system, the neuro voice field, that's when everything comes together. And quite frankly, your listeners, I'm going to tell you, you do have important things to say, and it will take courage. And even though you might not necessarily have a spoken voice coach, and they will not use the term neuro voice field, that's a me thing, this is what will make you heard. And I guess I'll funnily enough say it. So my book is called Why They Can't Hear You. And it's a practical guide. It's not heady. It will talk about the biases we face as people, whether that's men, women, people with different English as a foreign language / accents, LGBTQ, and the biases we face and how that impacts our bodies and then our voices. And that when we come back to being open, much like children tend to have very open bodies and nervous systems and voices, their voices just carry. The kid crying on the airplane is going through your noise canceling headphones and it's impacting you. But imagine that in your day-to-day life, maybe speaking up in that client meeting or saying to your boss something and they go, you know what, that is a really good idea. And then they don't look at you the same way and they go, oh, you're more of a leader. Because leading is about sharing those ideas and being perceived in a leadership way, like I was saying at that law firm. Yeah.
I can remember where I read this, but it said something about speaking as there is an art of listening element to it as well. Why I'm saying that is, and I'll tell you how I have seen it firsthand is that whenever I go and do any presentations and things, a lot of times people come up and say questions that are totally unrelated to the topic. And then gradually, with the experience, what I realized is that they are not questioning me, they are just trying to be heard. So, when I am speaking, there is an element of listening to it as well. Like how well I can listen to others is how well I can speak or maybe communicate. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts around it, especially because we touched upon the corporate and the lawyers and professional scenario related to speak.
I agree with you. So I have had quite a large amount of mediation training. I'm not like a qualified mediator, but because it was community training, I had 200 hours of training. And one of the first things they say is that people want to be heard. And it's how do you let them know that? It's the questions, it's the way you listen, it's the way you respond. I think one thing that people forget a lot about, let's say in tech or law, is people tend to fall into two major camps in communication. One is in logic and grounded reality. So the cat is black, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And then you have the artistic side where it's more like metaphors or overarching ideas. You might call them gestalts, where you go, the tree and the shrub are both plants. The science side go, no, they're different. The art side go, no, they're the same, because they see those overarching ideas. And so in tech and or law or in finance, how do you take this very logical and explain it to someone who might not be, they might be the other camp? Or how do you engage them? It doesn't necessarily be this camp, it could be even this camp, but how do you simplify it? So I was recently on another podcast as well, and I mentioned most people around the world have, in terms of English, an 11 to 16-year-old reading level. So if I say gestalt, most people, unless you went to higher education and studied sociology, have no idea what I'm talking about. That's why I said it's a metaphor. It's an overarching idea. So how do you say this JavaScript code can't do that because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G? I don't have the technical speak. How do you listen to your client? Because they might not understand. And then how do you lead them through it? And why is it possible or not possible? So one of the technical things that I hear a lot from tech people is we built the system this way, but the client wants this, but they don't realize they'd have to rebuild the whole system in order to do that. And how do you explain that to someone to make them feel heard, to listen clearly? And to another point, this is going to make you laugh, or at least it makes me laugh. When I work with executives, they can be a major person at a multinational company with like hundreds, if not thousands of employees, or a West End actor, or an entrepreneur, or a tech person. When I'm there with them and they're speaking, I'm there. I'm with them. They're like, I don't know how to deal with this. You're like staring at me. I'm like, well, I'm looking at you and I'm giving you my full focus. I was at Central a couple months ago, the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, where I teach, and I ran into the principal. And the thing about high-level actors is they will be there with you. It's very intimidating, but they're giving you their whole focus, their whole energy, their whole listening. And they're not uncomfortable with it. They're very grounded in their bodies. That's that open nervous system, the calm nervous system, the calm body, the open voice. And I think that plays to what you're saying as well. But people outside of that go, whoa, you're really intense, Sam. Like, you're with me. You're just with me. And I'm like, you're okay. but I'm trying to give you my full attention. Yeah.
That's amazing. Coming back to your book, we gave a little bit of context as to who the book is for and what it covers. Do you want to say something about the preparation for the book or more about any challenges that you faced while writing the book?
Yeah. So the book called Why They Can't Hear You is I made it because I wanted to take this specialized field that I honestly think is life changing. Even my students go like, I can't wait to have your book because I really try to apply voice work outside of just theater, outside of the classroom. How do you say no to someone and mean it? And people go, whoa, you meant no. And so I wrote it for more of a self help market, but I wrote it for people who, quite frankly, just don't feel heard. They feel invisible. They might be this really technical worker who really understands things, but feels like they get overlooked for the promotion, or their spouse doesn't listen to them, or their parents don't listen to them. And I feel like it can fundamentally change people's lives. And one of the challenges, so I'm still writing in the sense that we're going through final edits. It should be coming out in November or December range. I guess what I was struggling to do is make sure that I have a very balanced perspective. So I try to be quite middle on everything. And I know some people find that irritating, but I think maybe based on like my exposure to things like Taoism, which is like yin yang, everything must return to balance in life. And so I try to have a very balanced perspective. So women face biases of their voices. Men face biases. Like, for example, how many men keep getting told that they're saying the wrong thing? And when you are told that you don't have a voice, this is what makes people radical. This is what makes them feel oppressed. This is what makes people feel unheard and forgotten. And you're seeing it around the world in different groups. People don't feel heard and their voices have gotten tight over time and they feel like they're not part of the group. And so one thing I really try to do is have a balanced approach on that. That would probably be one thing that I was really trying to stay focused on, as well as my work can be very body and everyone's voice and their nervous system and connective tissue is different. So I was working with one entrepreneur and he kept swaying. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I held my arms around him, like my fingers like this. So I'm to the audience, I'm putting my fingers to the left and right if you're not watching online. And then he kept swaying left and right. So I kept kind of pushing him so he wouldn't move. And then he kind of found stillness. And until that point, it was all, I would like you to get this product and then a little bit up, then up. And he kept losing his train of thought. And I could tell his nervous system and body were overwhelmed. And when I got him to be a bit more still, this isn't going to work for everyone. It worked for him. All of a sudden, his words became very clear. But that's one small thing with one person. Another person, when I help them find length in their spine and their body relaxes, then all of a sudden they look like they're worth $1 million, $1 million, £1 million, a million UN, whatever. They come into their power. And so, how do I take so much information? Because it could be the way you're speaking it and how to move people with your words in terms of like the content. It could be the way that if you're doing more like on stage or public speaking or even in a meeting, how do these subtle markers in terms of your speaking and movement change perception? Or what is a voice exercise I think is safe for everyone that's not going to cause injury to their voices when I'm not there to guide them? And this is why I think spoken voice work is important to work with someone, but again, they might not have the same framework. Voice teachers have a tendency to be very artistic and metaphorical, and they might not be able to put in very grounded words what the impact is or why you're doing it. That's where I'm lucky because I have a background in business for 15 years and then switched over to theater practices. How do you find these general things for people who don't feel heard that are practical to do in their home and day-to-day life. Because I truly believe it'll make them empowered. It'll change their life. But again, everyone's so different. There was someone else who, when she spoke, her voice would always go, your voice can move in different directions in space. So it'd go to the sides and it would never go forward. And I got her to do an exercise and everyone was like, whoa, her voice went so forward. And even the guy who was typing and wasn't paying attention, he was just kind of the administrator, lifted his head and he was like, whoa, that was crazy. But that was very specific to her. That's not going to be everyone. Everyone's voice and body is different. It really depends on what each person needs. And it takes time to unravel the tension in the body. It takes time to learn to calm the nervous system. So our acting students, I don't expect this of everyone because not everyone needs to be a West End star. But over 3 years, they get 3,000 hours of training, not just spoken voice, but other things. It takes time to build. And so that was a struggle with the book as well. And now the new thing is, how do I let people know about this field that's basically been hidden from them? How do they know what it is? Because it isn't just public speaking. Yeah.
That's really great. And I wanted to follow this path that we talk about the fail with me, we talk about the problems, and then we kind of finish on a high note talking about the book and where you worked on, where you focus, sort of thing. The book is not out yet. Usually, what happens is on the show, I request my guests if they would like to read something from their book. Do you want to? I didn't prepare you for that, so might not be a good idea, but it's up to you.
I think for right now, because we're going through final edits, my publisher will
Will
probably
not
say
allow it. Yeah.
will not allow it. I think, though, that the whole idea, I will talk about this point, though. The whole idea is people have been told, like, I hear it all the time with parents, whether it's in the UK, Canada, other countries. I can hear it, especially if I speak the language. They'll tell their kids to be quiet, or like, you'll even hear people say, shut up. And I go, whoa, like, you don't understand the impact you're having on your child's voice. And it's these things that we carry with us. Or I had a student who a teacher said to them they had the worst voice they ever heard. You have no right to say that to someone. Now they're going to carry that with them their whole life. And the whole point of the book is remembering that you have something to say, that your voice is worth hearing. And when you open up, the nervous system calms down, the body opens, the voice then opens. You come into that natural power, you become irresistible, you become influential. And it's your natural right to have that voice, to be heard, to be open. And so it is my hope that people find that, and whatever level of it, they find it. And in terms of the book, no, I'll continue with one more thing. I think you deserve to be powerful, listeners. I think you deserve to be respected. And most of all, obviously, because I'm biased, I think you deserve to be heard. And that's what I want the readers and the listeners and people who work with me to feel. You might be in a male-dominated space and you are the only woman, but you deserve to be heard. Or you're a man that's been told by the other men or women that you're not good enough to be heard. How do you do that? I'm not saying be aggressive. I'm not saying be loud. I'm not saying yell. But how do you have that natural power that's available to you? I think that'd be my final thought about the book without reading it. But that is the way I tried to write it, is that sense of finding what it already belongs to you.
I would also like to add, for our viewers, for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, if you liked the ideas that we explored into this discussion, please check Sam's book, because by the time this episode comes, and I think the book should be available, and we will have the book link in the episode description. So one of my ideas, to promote and amplify the voice of writers is that, you can just come and talk about the book, but there is so much more to it that has become the book. So it's
Yeah.
like meeting the writer, getting a sneak peek into the mind of the writer, their voice. So I think it kind of speaks to the theme of the podcast. It talks
Mm,
about so many important sort of areas in
mm.
human psychology, and it, it is really amazing. I loved talking to you. I just want to request the listeners to check out the book.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention it might be too late by that time, but we'll see. So my book will have an exclusive pre-sale. So there's only going to be 1,000 copies. So don't go fighting for them because there's already people signing up for it. And it's on my website, www.elevatevoice.co.uk/book. So I'll spell that out, www.elevatevoice.co.uk. So .co.uk/book. Because I think it's like people keep, even all my clients are like, I want your book. I want your book. I want it before anyone. So I'm trying to get it out there before with pre-sales. But no, it's been amazing. And thank you so much. And I think to all the writers out there as well, because we work on like Shakespeare and musical theater and acting. We do so much work at these top drama schools. We all know that if the writing's bad, the performance is bad. So your work is incredibly important. So thank you for that as well.
That's amazing. Thank you for your time today. Lovely talking to you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah.